I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick them.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized right up to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look, as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Welcome to the I'm Telling God About This podcast. In the news, Donald Trump assassination attempt at 6 p.m. on Saturday night, and we're here to talk about it. If you don't understand by now that the people that are calling for the destruction of this country and the harassment of you, believe them that they are who they say that they are. And I think that the way that we ought to respond is important. And so here we're going to talk about this. There might be some differences in ways that we go about this, but I think that there definitely does need to be a response. And I do think that the the American people need to rise up, and that's just my opinion. And we need to basically say, let's stop being childish and kind of move forward, not deal with all of the politics of it all. But we're seeing a lot of interesting talks and narratives on it. We're not going to go over all of the details of, what happened to the Secret Service and conspiracy theories or things that we don't necessarily know. But I think that it is fair to discuss the things that we do know and what led up to this. I don't think anybody is surprised that an attempt was made. This is not something that was shocking. This is not something that was unexpected. But I will say that this event on Saturday evening produced one of the coolest, most epic moments, I think, in American history.
Do you have the shot?
I have. Yeah, I have the picture.
Can you share it?
Just throw that up because
the history of what is taking place right now.
The thumbnail. So for context,
oh, that's a good idea.
You should see this. You should know what this is. But man, I'll tell you, Donald Trump giving a speech, getting shot at, it grazing his ear, and he comes back up and he's like, fight for America. And then we get this shot. It's like, there is not a more badass moment, I think, in American history.
Every history book is going to have this.
Gosh.
Every single history book. I've already seen, they're making T-shirts about this. Like, it's just going, which I think is fantastic.
There was a guy who got it tattooed on him.
Oh,
I saw that.
I didn't see that.
He tattooed on his arm or something.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. One of the things. So here's the thing. Before we kind of go into the response, one of the things that I did see about this and online, and let me know if you guys have seen the same thing. There have been a lot of people that have kind of come out and said, I want to encourage people to admit, I was wrong. I was wrong to hate Donald Trump, because I realized at this moment when he basically got shot at, stood up and was like, fight for America, and was all pro-patriotic, something ignited in people of like, wait a minute, I'm done playing these games and playing this outsider role. I'm an American, and this is the way that I want a leader to respond. And
yeah, that's
it's
good.
like, so there's, I don't know if you guys have had moments in your your political progression, or where you've essentially fallen in a political stance, but I remember when I was in high school and I'm getting into politics, there was a lot that I was not necessarily in line with the Republicans or the Democrats, and I think that just mostly because I didn't know, but two, also in watching the news, I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm finding the truth, and a lot of the influences in my life and a lot of the people that were in my life were very anti-American in some sense, like they believed in,
you grew
like,
up in
this
what state
racist system
again?
California. So so there was this kind of like the white people are racist, country is dumb. Not the music, but like
men
people
and women
from the
are
country
equal.
are dumb. I guess country music is dumb too. Like there was all of these things like, oh yeah, there's this oppressor and then the oppressed, right? Like, so there was this narrative, and though I didn't like go through and like dye my hair blue or something, of course it was, it was the like late 90s, early 2000s. So I
would your
did the
hair
frosty
take
tips,
blue
the
dye?
bleached hair.
Can that happen?
No, it won't. No, it won't.
We should test it out.
I don't think that works.
There was no. It doesn't do it well. But one of the things that for
drop
me,
your
I
screen share
remember.
real quick.
I was gonna say, you're still sharing your screen.
Oh,
screen
am I?
share?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the things for me, like this experience, for me is I had this. I allowed, without knowing, I allowed this kind of smugness towards our country to kind of enter into my psychology. And it wasn't a conscious thing, but I looked at like, oh, well, gosh, all these rich people and are oppressing these poor people, and all these white people are oppressing these black people. And I mean, I get that was my environment. All of my friends were black and Hispanic. I didn't have anybody from a different perspective. So that was what was being fed to me. And I remember being at like a theater show in Palm Springs, California. And it was, we were taken there as we were invited by an older gentleman that I very much respect in my life, and very patriotic person. And I remember it was like an old people show. It was a show about early America in the 1940s, and it was really about the GI generation. And all of these people would get, I think the play is called The Follies, and they literally get bussed into to see this show because it's very much praising America and all this stuff. And I remember sitting there with my brother going, oh my gosh, they're going like full on 1940s patriotic. And there was a moment at the end of the presentation where they said, if you have served in the war, in Vietnam or in World War II, stand up and be recognized for what you've done for your country. And I remember sitting there, and everybody around me and in front of me stood up as they played the national anthem. And there was this big American flag that kind of dropped down, and everybody stood up. And I'm like realizing, how dare I be so smug to not acknowledge the battle and the representation and the values that they went through, talking about the American values of what we are, God-fearing people, of how we honor people. We want the people to be able to find success, to be able to pick themselves up from the bootstraps, to be able to defend against tyranny, to be able to defend against evil. And I had this experience where it just was transforming to me, and I realized like, wow, there was this patriotic feeling that came up in me, and I was like, I have been so wrong. And so that was a long story to say, I think that was the experience for a lot of people when they saw Trump get shot. Then he springs up and is like this powerful, savage leader that is like so pro-American. I think people were like, I am so desperate to be fighting for something that's real, and I'm so sick and tired of playing these games. And that's what
interesting.
That's what I'm seeing. But I don't know.
That's not what
that's
seeing? Not how I interpret the psychology, because I've seen it. I've seen a number of testimonials of people saying that was like an eye-opening moment for their perspective, but I don't think it's patriotism at its core. I think that what people are flocking to is strength, and I don't think that they have seen certainly in the younger generations, anybody probably really our age and younger,
for something,
because no, not just stand for something, because you can have all the blustery, we'll say Ted Cruz's or they'll go out there, they'll stand for something, but people are so inoculated to that because they know it's just words, and they're a dime a dozen people willing to go out and say this or that or whatever. I think what they're attracted to in an environment of chaos, which we're obviously in, and we've obviously been in for a while, is simply a raw show of fortitude. And I think there's a primal attraction that says, I want that guy in my corner. And I don't even really care about all the details all of a sudden. I just want order and strength, and someone who's willing to literally just unflappably shake off a bullet and say, I'm still going.
Yep.
Yeah. The severity of the situation, right? I'm just going off of the words that they used, but the sentiment that you're raising, I think, is very powerful. Like, being able to go and look at it's not something that's just rhetoric. Somebody could easily stand up in a stage without any risk and say something. That's not bravery, right? It's not bravery in Hollywood for actors to give an Oscar speech and call for equal pay for women and protection against the LGBTQ community and be considered brave. Like, no, everybody is accepting you. Nobody thinks you're brave. You know what is brave? Is standing up when you're in the middle of a gunfight. Right, and not getting carried off and whisked away.
It's more than that, though, because some of the ideologues on the left who are cynical enough not to actively resist being swayed by something that they instinctively feel is different, but they don't actually want to admit that. Some of the things I've seen said is like, oh well, so-and-so was a prisoner of war, and so-and-so fought in this war, and blah, blah, blah. And, we've had plenty of political leaders with, strength and courage. It's like, it's different. It is actually different for a bullet to just whiz by you when you're not in a combat situation. You're not doing these things. It's entirely out of context. And it is it's that unflappability that actually makes it different, because frankly, I think one of the examples John McCain in a POW camp. It's I don't see John McCain, even with his experience, having responded that way. I never saw him do anything that made him think that he would have given us anything like that fist pumping, pop right back up with blood streaming down your face, aggression in response to being literally physically attacked out of the blue when that's not even supposed to be something that's on the table.
Yep.
Right.
Well, it was very much a fight or flight, which I see a lot of people talking about, and you've seen it. You can't train that. That's an innate response, and I would immediately say to anybody that says, "Oh, look, Trump's being flamboyant again." It's like, no, that was 5 to 10 seconds after the event. If you've ever been in any level of a traumatic experience, a car accident, any level of actual serious trauma, it is fight or flight, and that was an innate response, which I do think is, I would say, honorable. I would say resilient. I would say worth wanting to follow such a leader. And part of the reason I wanted to talk about what's going on right now is because, I immediately go to what now? What's next? I immediately start processing that. I mean, even with my wife, I immediately found out it was happening. I, try to stay pretty relevant with current events and when things start popping off. And I was just processing worst case scenarios, right? Worst case scenario number one, when it was actively happening, 6:30 p.m., he was driven off. We didn't know if he was alive, if he had taken other bullets, which is normal.
In the moment, we don't know
happen.
if he was shot anywhere else.
And I was desperately waiting to hear he was going to the hospital, he was in triage, because for me, the immediate immediate number one fear is if he dies, oh my gosh, what tinderbox situation response. And then he didn't. And then we found out, okay, he's okay. And then
do you think that we would have genuinely gone into a civil war or the starts of an actual civil war if he had been killed?
I think in this postulation, I think if he had died, it would have been looked back in history as the shot heard round the world, as the initial action that started. Because I think, again, in this postulation that I am in no way advocating for, I think you would have seen riots. You would have seen a lot more physical aggression as future political events continue to unravel. I mean, think about it. Like, who's going to be the second candidate? Who's going to run for the Republican Party if that had happened? And then, like, all of it would have devolved very fast. So I'm glad that didn't happen. And I'm glad that that's not a reality we have to live in. My second fear now, which I'm curious what you all think about, is I'm now even more concerned if, obviously, the presupposition is that we have a legal and democratic election process, that if he doesn't win, I'm equally now concerned for the tinderbox situation we have, because this just amped everybody up even higher. And I'm just like, oh, crap.
If he doesn't win now...
I agree.
I don't know, man. I can't imagine that anybody would trust our judicial system, or not our judicial,
which is another serious problem.
Let me take that. Let me take your question at face value, though, because you're talking like we dodged a bullet, right? But keep talking about this. That we, America, by the fact that Trump didn't die, spared us something that might otherwise have gone poorly. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
But you keep referring to this tinderbox. Guys, the tinderbox is there. It's been there for a while. It's not going away. And the reason that I don't think this event in either direction, it would have been more of an acceleration than an actual inflection point, is because neither wing of the political spectrum actually recognizes the legitimacy of the other side if they lose. If my preferred candidates lose this election, I'm not going to believe that that's credible. Like, just that's not going to happen. Right? Similarly, we know from what we saw in 2016, right, that the left is not willing to accept the legitimacy of an electoral defeat, right up to trying to subvert the electoral college, right, to get them to just thwart the will of the people while making up justifications like, well, the popular vote should really be the thing that controls it anyway, and all this stuff. And so the issue is that when you see a lot of because you showed the video of some of the heated rhetoric that probably laid the groundwork for this, but we've also seen any number of people, including like sitting Congress people, staffers, and lower level state representatives, mayors. Like, these aren't nobodies. These aren't Russian sock puppets on Twitter, right? These are people just openly saying, yeah, I'm bummed that he missed, hey, maybe if you're going to do something like this, go take, shooting lessons. Like, that's the kind of thing that they're saying, because they don't believe in the political process. And to a very serious extent, neither does the other side. And so that's the actual formulation of the tinderbox, because previously political power was handed off via violence, pretty much exclusively, and it was maintained through force. Well, we've now pretty much gotten past the idea that we're going to have some broadly peaceful, orderly handoff of power. And that tinderbox is still there, and whether or not he got shot or gets shot or somebody else gets shot or some other event happens or who wins the next election, we're still on the same path.
So what point?
I agree. So I'm saying the tinderbox, I'm acknowledging, the tinderbox is there. I'm not saying it just arrived. I'm simply saying the tinderbox got bigger. There's more dry gunpowder in it, and I was afraid that this would light it. I think we can both agree.
Oh, absolutely.
The box has
yes, this
the box,
did not light it today.
That and I was afraid instantly that it did, and now.
But tinderboxes always get lit. Like
I don't know about that. I would disagree.
Well,
with
it's
that.
like showing the gun in Act 1. If you don't have it go off by Act
right. This is
2,
this is
like...
the Chekhov's revolution. These two groups of people super hate each other. I wonder what's going to happen.
So we agree, and my postulations you're all in line with. My second postulation, to your point, Tim, is that the tinderbox could light. There's a potential for it to light again with this election in November. And so, again, back to my question, which I think is relevant if you're listening and you're a Christian or you're a moral individual. I mean, those are the things we discuss on this podcast. What now? What next? What do we do with this? I would love to hear y'all's thoughts because we just witnessed history and we had a certain outcome. And literally, what now? What next? I'm just so curious. Like, it doesn't have to be some kind of like prophecy. I'm just curious how you think about that. Well, I can answer myself.
But speaking of prophecy, did you see the one where the guy actually prophesied Trump getting shot in the ear?
Yeah. No.
Did you? Oh,
3 months ago?
Yeah,
I think I can pull that clip up if we want to share it.
I don't know what wing of the charismatics he comes from, but he was on like a podcast with a couple of it, and they were like, "We're just gonna talk about our prophecies today." Like it's the super run of the mill thing.
We're gonna move into the prophetic. Well, but at the same time, like, and this is where I would say from a theological standpoint, right? I'm conflicted with that because he got things more accurate than saying I saw in a vision that Trump would be an attempt at assassination would be given to Trump. He didn't just say that. He said that he was attempted assassination and he was shot and the bullet came so close to his ear, and then he says it burst his eardrum. Which you could say, well, if you're getting a vision of this and you're seeing blood coming out of the ear, which might seem like that's what happens when a bursted eardrum. Either way, how he defines it or not, that was very accurate. Now you can say, this was a revelation.
Are we discussing the validity of this prophecy right
now?
Here's
why you know it's a false prophecy, because he preceded by saying that God told him his son was returning imminently. Full stop. That's how you know it's a false prophecy.
All right, let's not derail here.
Okay. Anyway, so basically that there is this
who
is
knows
this
the
is
day
kind of
and
where
the
I
hour,
think people
Anderson?
take it.
Who knows the day and the
Hold
hour?
on. Imminently is not the day and the hour, Tim. Don't go and try to act like that's some sort of prediction. Anyway, so let's move on from that. But I thought that was interesting. I think a lot of people are taking it a little bit too seriously because there's a lot of other things that happened in there and that clip didn't show, and like, okay, we'll have to see what happens. So anyway, putting prophecy aside and that kind of branch of charismatic society,
we're gonna hash that out. I'm making a list, buddy.
Just making a list. Well, here's the thing. Let's all of the charismania leading up in the 2020 election with all the prophets that were proclaiming things. Like, honestly, those people that were making those claims, they need to repent, and a lot of them have not. So, but anyway, it was very close. The shot was like super close. What I thought was really cool is literally how close it was. Did you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know how accurate this is, and I'm not
photo. There's a photo of the bullet actually moving. Like you see the photo of the bullet. Yeah.
But it's not just that it was the angle, right? So he that he turned his head at like the exact moment. It's that he slightly looked up too. It was like it had to be perfect to the right and up because he was looking at a screen and it went by. It's like the fact that it is crazy. Now here's the thing. I hope with all of this, that we see Trump respond to God in this, and it seems like it's interesting because he gave this. I'll share this with you guys. He gave on Truth Social. He said, tweeted out this. He says, "Thank you to everyone for your thoughts and prayers yesterday, as it was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening. We will fear not," which you hear that often in the Old Testament. It's like, fear not, the Lord is with you. And I don't know if it sounds like he's using that language, but he's saying yesterday, as your prayers yesterday, as God It was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening. Now, here's one of two things. You can say, oh, well, he knows that his base is a very religious base. Or you can be like, yeah, the guy just had a near-death experience here. I think something probably clicked, and I'm hoping and praying.
His wife is a devout Catholic as well.
Is his wife a devout Catholic?
You can unshare your screen, Anderson.
Oh, thank you. Guys, you got to remind me of this.
I remember seeing...
Melania?
I think it was Melania meeting the Pope. That was a big deal for her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it's not as if he doesn't have any organic religious influences in his life, even though mostly we would probably, those of us would probably say he has not historically been an actual devout Christian in word and deed.
Okay, so question for you guys. So last episode we literally talked about the two forks in the road of something that could unite America. One fork was external strife, one fork was internal strife. Again, we believe our God is sovereign over everything, and he does work in spite of any man. So I'm curious, again, you haven't answered my question, what now, what next? Okay. I'm curious if, and I'm, again, the eternal optimist on the show here, is there a chance that this further unites, this is internal strife, yet not the worst kind, that this further unites people? You saw people like Elon Musk come out in support of Trump. You saw people like, I forget all the names now, massive people came out in support of Trump. And I am curious about the narrative as it continues, because the irony, if you really step back and you look at the picture, I wouldn't use the word devolving. I would use the word very interesting moments transpiring, because you have the left in turmoil now, where a significant portion of very out-voiced individuals are saying, hey, Biden needs to step down. We need to bring in somebody else to run against Trump. And now, while they're at a very moment in time divided, you see the right will never be more united than right now. And anyone on the middle is getting pulled right. Again, this is not a political sideshow. We're not talking sides here. I'm trying to read the landscape. I'm hopeful. I'm curious about y'all's opinions, because I think that this does have the potential to further unite Americans, potentially.
So, Tim, you mind if I go first? Plus, it'll give me an opportunity to respond to what I say.
What is inappropriate about said question?
No. So what I'm saying is, I think, here's the thing. I agree with you, Nick. I think that this is an opportunity for America to unite. But I think it's what's the most important thing is to not say that flippantly, is not to say that without definitions. The question is to unite to what?
Agreed.
Right?
Love it. Define it.
If we're going to play this,
let's go.
If we're going to play the game that Joe Biden and a lot of the congressmen on the left and even on the right are saying, to say, well, violence is not the answer. We need to tone down our rhetoric. We need to not make this as hostile, and we need to come together as Americans. Which, I mean, the irony in that statement coming from the people that have been calling Trump Hitler and calling his followers deplorables, and to be calling us the literal enemy, us as in Christians, the enemy of women's rights and the LGBT community and all this. So there's irony there, right? But having them go and say, well, we need to tone this down, to me, that's not something to reunite around. What I think we ought to unite around is truth, is morality, is a Christian ethic, is the basis for what brings the true identity to this country, and what it is and what it should be, not what it is become. So in this sense, I think we need to unite around that there are two genders. There's just men and women. And we need to cut out all of this and help people rather than elevating them and enabling them to do damage to themselves and to children. Like, and we could go down the list of all of the things that this podcast has covered regarding abortion, LGBTQ rights, and encouraging the family, encouraging flourishing, encouraging having children, raising them in godly homes. That's where I think that we can unite, because, and I think that it will stick in the sense that it is something that is proven. It is something that has been experienced and can be said, yeah, this works. And it's almost, in my mind, it's almost as if the people that are being pulled to the right, like you said, Nick, in my opinion, it seems to me that there is a little bit of a conviction that there's blood on their own hands, that like, I contributed to this, right? And it's like, wow, I want to give the benefit of the doubt.
No, let me challenge you. Okay. You said that your issue was that people who had promoted these things, who had said these kinds of things, that there would be conviction on their part that they had caused this. Those are the people you think are coming over to the right?
No, the people that have basically let this happen and said, "Oh, I don't like Trump, and I think that he is evil." Those people did come over. Those, by their own admission, they have come over and said, "Hey, this is a picture of me back in 2018 saying Trump is a Nazi. This is the picture of me going," and these are the people that I'm talking about. That is a objective reality.
I don't think those people are as I think the people that what's happening is, I think you're doing kind of a substitution. You're seeing one very real arc that people go through, right? And so you see it, and they see, and this happened, and this happened. In fact, Elon Musk had tweeted a thread today of a girl who was basically describing that exact personal journey. Like, this happened, and then this happened, and she starts to see the holes, right, in the narrative, and the inconsistencies, and all of that stuff start to, crumble. And then, obviously she's, once you start noticing those kinds of things, you are typically on a path towards something that's more grounded in truth than where you came from. I think you're vastly overestimating how many of those people there are. And B, I think you are overestimating the extremity of the position that they started from. You, I think, are very much talking about people, passive participants who are going along with their circumstances, right? The person who just showed up to Berkeley with no pre-existing positions and just kind of went along with it. Yes, those exist. I would draw a very firm distinction between those people, which are very few, and the people who are actively perpetrating. And you need to be careful, though. Sure. Hear me out. You need to be careful not to be proactively extending undue grace to the people who are not in that position.
Well, okay. It doesn't look. I grant it. I'm going to extend grace to anybody who repents, regardless. But I agree.
So does.
Bro,
what does repentance look like?
Repentance looks like repentance, like changing your mind. That's what repentance means.
Right. Okay. But the point is, they actually have to demonstrate that, right? And so I think what you're doing is you're actually extending some leniency on the basis of the possibility of repentance and not actual repentance.
Well, what I'm saying, and what I've always said and said from this, and I think you're making an argument out of what I didn't say, is that there are people that have turned and felt convicted that they were part of this problem, or they were done. Right?
They bandwagon.
That's all I said.
They got swept up into the bandwagon.
So that's the point. That's the people I'm talking about. Whether you want to say that there's one of them,
but here's
or there's
what,
a bunch of them.
Maybe this isn't what you're saying, and if it's not, let me know. But what I also hear as the logical follow-up, because you're answering Nick's question of where do we go from here, what I'm hearing is, hey, see, this group of people turned to our side on the basis of this. Therefore, we need to give room for more of these people who are still actively opposing us to come over to our side while they're still opposing us in rhetorical and
there's
violent
boundaries
ways.
Like, we're not going to go and take an active enemy and invite them into an inner circle. But
you're going to give them space to continue being your enemy in the hopes that they repent?
Sure. I mean, that's essentially...
What's the alternative? That's actually a better question. If you're not creating the room to discuss what it could look like for centrists, because that was my point. If you're not creating room for centrists who may have traditionally been leaning left now easily finding a new path to the side of what you could say maybe is traditional conservatism. Like, I don't think we're having a conversation about
I'm not
how
trying to make a path to traditional conservatism. I think that's been an abject failure in the post-World War II period. I mean, look where
I don't
we
know
are
what either of you are
compared to-
saying, so help me understand.
Okay, so what I'm saying is we need to unite around the things that this podcast has been talking about, the
Love it.
positions, the kind of things, and I think that we have a space for that. Donald Trump has said that he's thrown out his speech that he was going to be very vitriolic and very aggressive, and he's going to try to move towards something that is unites America. Now, I'm skeptical of that. What I don't want to hear Trump say is both there are good people on both sides, right? Like, and like legitimizing
I'm
something
sorry,
like the evil.
You do know that was a hoax.
Yeah, it was refuted.
If you're
the notion that Trump said there's good people on both sides.
I said nothing about the Charlottesville thing. I'm saying
that
about
was
okay. You just used the verbatim words, and I just want to make sure you know.
I know. I
that
used
was a
the verbatim
media-driven
for a
hoax.
reason because that's the way that the left is using it to make it seem like he's saying good on both sides. So what I'm saying is I don't want him to come out and say, well, there's some good people on the left that have been calling for my assassination, and they're good people. We just need to give them space. I'm not saying that. I don't want to have. I think we need to call out this evil for what it is, and I think that we just need, honestly, just need an adult in the room to say, hey, cut it out. Right? This is the way that reality is. Like, do you want to go and destroy this country? Because this is how we destroy the country, by enabling mental disorders and taking things out of the DSM-5 that should be in the DSM-5. This is how we destroy the country, by breaking up the nuclear family. This is how we destroy the country, by mutilating children. Right? That needs to be said. Whereas the unity can come around and say, let's get back to loving each other in a neighborly way, right? We can have disagreements over things, but it has to be within the grounds of reality. It has to be with the grounds of, okay, if you're a socialist or you are a communist and you believe that, fine. But the moment that you start acting on that, we could debate that, but the moment you start calling for, slashing Republicans' throat, like there was a video that was going around like that, okay, yeah, you've gone outside the bounds of good faith argument. If you're not going to make a good faith argument, you're no longer invited into this house. You know what I mean? Or at least into the public square, if you're not making good faith arguments and you're just calling for violence. And that's something that I think that goes beyond free speech. Calling for violence and literally going and saying, hey, I'm going to assassinate somebody, that's something that's outside the public sphere, I think.
So Anderson, you're saying that your answer to my question was we need to unite around what would be considered traditional Judeo-Christian values. Is that the summary?
The foundations of what made this country what it is.
With you. Totally heard.
That's the next step.
Tim,
that I think.
What's your answer? What now? What next?
Yeah, I think both of you, because in fact, just in our last episode, Nick, you and I had this little back and forth where you were rightly hoping for a smooth transition past the obvious like a universe in which the tinderbox never gets sparked, right?
Totally. We all hope that.
Yeah. So, well, we do. Obviously, we do, right? And let me draw a parallel, right? Like an alternative history parallel. Because a similar tinderbox was created at the founding of the country with respect to slavery, and then grew more poignant over time. And obviously, that was resolved in true, direct conflict crisis, right? And there was a very significant escalation that happened at various times through what were the legal institutions that existed, and one side justified it on the basis that they were pursuing what was the moral choice, and one side justified their actions on the de jure justifications for what had happened. And then they both had a point as far as the basis of their decision-making went. Then, of course, ultimately all of those got swept aside, and it was resolved with violence. there is an alternative path there, hypothetically, where the economics of slavery were not good. Like that was not a productive, helpful, competitive way to run a largely agrarian economy. And I mean, if you legalized agrarian slavery today, nobody would use it because
we have tractors and
Everybody
machinery.
feel terrible and guilty.
Well, are you going to put a slave behind the wheel of a $200,000 tractor? Like, no, obviously not.
That's true. I didn't really. Yeah, I didn't think you were talking like that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but because even if you look at like the per capita, this was many years ago. I saw this. Someone had done an economic analysis of the per capita output per basically slave compared to the same measure, to the extent that it could be comparable, of just free people working for themselves. And it was night and day. Like, turns out a slave is only going to work hard enough to not get whipped as often. Right? And so the point of going into all that is that there are two paths, absolutely. And you do need to look for an off-ramp if it's available. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. However, you don't do it through weakness, right? So you wouldn't have wanted, if you were in the North, if you were in a free, a non-slave state, you wouldn't say, hey, I think this whole slavery thing is going to peter out for economic reasons. That seems to be, because it was on the decline in terms of its usage in the South. To that's pretty
in the
clear.
World too. It was on the.
You wouldn't say, hey, let's just leave that in place, and why don't we just, rather than having all these borders and stuff, let's just expand it to everywhere, and it'll go away on its own eventually, and what have you. You do still actually have to take hard stances, but also you have to be willing to recognize that that's not the likely outcome for most of these situations. And so what I do see both of you doing is kind of leapfrogging past the tinderbox and imagining some unspecified way in which we dance around it via words like, unity, and we have to share values and all this stuff. And I don't see a very concrete, credible description of what that's even supposed to look like in the way that I just described how it would have looked with slavery, right?
But
I gave some
for a second, though, before you pivot your narrative to what we are doing, I actually think you're making a really elegant case. So I want to continue. I'm going to encourage you to continue.
But my point
because
is that
I really think you're onto something.
Yeah, the case that I just made with respect to slavery is the actual case that I think you guys need to actually make in the universe where we tiptoe around the tinderbox, and I'm not hearing it. I'm hearing unity, and
don't pivot to what we're doing yet. I'm saying keep going because you're onto something. So you said, I'm with you. You're actually making phenomenal sense. I've never heard this articulated so well.
I'll just do your side next time. And
no. So listen to me. You got to keep going because you're stopping, and I'm hanging on to every. I'm hanging on to every
side
word.
Of it. I'm going to stop.
That's what I want to hear. I want to hear your side. So I'm saying I'm hanging on to every word you're saying. You proposed the hey, there were these two sides. There was this economic argument.
I'm about to give you my side.
Let's go.
I'm going to do it.
Let's go.
In contrast, though, I wanted to contrast that with what I think is a genuine view of the optimistic side, and I don't think that's where we are. Okay, so on my side of it, it's pretty straightforward, right? First of all, most people aren't, and Anderson and I were having this conversation yesterday, most people aren't actually that politically engaged. That's true.
Totally.
Right? So the fact of the matter is, though, they still abide by the rules of the left. Most people, even if they're not politically engaged, instinctively have understood that they're not allowed to say, oh, that's gay, as an epithet within earshot of the general public, right? But those same people will happily say Jesus Christ as an epithet in the same way without even thinking about who might be listening, right? And so you have to recognize that we are behind right now in terms of our ability to enforce our standards on society. We are not on equal footing just because we may have a candidate that is, polling, 50-50 with the other guy, okay? You actually have to start using the power that you have, the legal and institutional power that you have. You also have to start using the social power. You do actually have to start shaming people. And that's where I think the inclination to be gracious, to proactively extend grace to people who have not shown any repentance to their attitudes or the consequences of what those positions are. You can't do that, okay? You actually have to ridicule. You have to shame. You have to use as the blueprint the way that the apostles spoke to heretics, the way that Jesus spoke to the Pharisees. These were not lightweight things that were said, and these are people perpetrating evil, right? You have to use the same mentality that we would be very comfortable using against, the very evil prosperity gospel ministers, right? Against our more broadly ideological enemies, and they do need to be relentlessly shamed, ridiculed for any of those positions. Then you actually have to use the legal means that's at your disposal. So, for example, we look at all of what most people interpret as lawfare against President Trump, right?
By the way, breaking news, as of filming this, he was just one of the judges just dismissed one of his cases.
Yeah, the big one, the federal one that they... Yeah. Anyway, so what you need to do is you need to turn around and say, hey, we're going to start indicting every Democrat that we have any excuse to indict and start threatening with jail time. You actually have to do that.
For what action?
Do not. It doesn't matter, Josh Anderson. What did they indict Trump for?
So find something to indict them. It's okay. I hear what you're saying. We might disagree, but I hear what you're saying. Keep going.
I'm trying to understand how we want to threaten them with jail time for something, though, right?
Just anything. It literally doesn't matter. Look at the stuff they made up to charge Trump. I'm not kidding. Okay. Look at the stuff they made up to charge Trump for. I'm not disagreeing that they made
things up. I'm trying to figure out how utilizing the justice system to make up charges against somebody else is justified.
Oh, yeah, okay. So here's why you do it. You make up, here's the thing. You find the most legitimate charges you can, obviously. And frankly, the more legitimate, the better. You actually do want these people to go to jail. But the difference is our justice system is supposed to operate on the idea that we see crimes, we prosecute them, and we put those people in jail. You don't choose a person, look for their crime, prosecute them aggressively because of politically who they are, right? That's the paradigm that has been employed against Trump. And I am saying that the only way to create an appropriate counter incentive to that continued behavior, which there currently is none. There is currently no reason to believe that Democrats in the justice system and in the court system will not continue to use the exact same playbook against others that they dislike, that they have against Trump, because no counter incentive has been created. We have to actually start using that same paradigm until we all agree that that's not something that we're supposed to be doing.
Oh,
right?
Okay. Sorry, I didn't let you finish. I didn't understand where you were going. Okay.
And so, those are just two governmental, non-governmental examples of how you actually have to start fighting this war. You have to go and find the states where they're having drag queen story hours and pride parades, and you actually need to start prosecuting the adult participants in those for indecent exposure to children. There's not a state that doesn't have some law that would apply to those things, right? You need to actually start threatening the parents of children who intentionally expose them to that with the removal of their children. You have because that is exactly what both houses of the congressional legislature threatened parents with if they didn't affirm their children's gender. You absolutely must reflect that on them in order to motivate disarmament, right? Because how does that happen with nuclear weapons, right? For many years, when Russia and when the USSR and the United States were the only major nuclear powers of any consequence, it was only the realization that okay, we've both got this, we could both use it. There's not really any point in doing that. Why don't we we'll both just dial it back some? But if one or the other party, if the United States had just gone and said, hey, this is silly, we're just gonna decommission all these nukes, right? That would have been the opposite of effective. And so that instinct to leapfrog to we need to unify and we need to find common values. It's no, you have to do all of that from a position of actual strength. And so those politically unaffiliated people or unengaged people that I referenced earlier, they know enough to be afraid of the left, both socially, governmentally. They're not afraid of the right. They're not afraid that, like, no parent is actually afraid that a district attorney is going to charge them with the corruption of youth or whatever the charge is of course that was what Plato was charged with, so contributing to the delinquency of a youth or something like that, because they go and intentionally expose their children to what amounts to strip shows, right? They're not afraid of that because the right doesn't do that, and I'm saying they have to start. They actually have to start
enforcing things.
Does that answer your question, Nick?
Yeah.
I think you answered my question very clearly from like what government should start doing, but and maybe there's just a clarifier. My only thing would be is, okay, so if I'm a Christian listening to the I'm Telling God About This podcast, hearing, like, when I hear what you just said, I'm still not sure what I should do now, what I should do next, because I don't think you're telling me to go picket things. What's next for me? No. That's why I said you didn't say that. I'm saying what's next for me, or what now for me.
The issue is that most of the substantive concrete actions are things that you do via some institution, right? Whether that's, because that's true. Like, you look at all of the outrageous things that we see, whether it's men participating in women's sports, men being allowed in the, girls' bathrooms. These are actual offensive actions that are perpetrated by an existing institution, right? So if you went to someone on the left and said, oh, how do you intend to promote LGBTQ rights? That's their end goal, is those actual points of action, right? So part of it, though, is not being, and this is actually probably the real social shift that I think I've seen in a couple of days since the assassination attempt on Trump, is that there's a lot less embarrassment about self-identifying as a Republican or a Trump supporter.
Totally agree.
Right. And that's part of it. So you do actually have to be willing to openly mock things in public where people can hear it because it's evil, right? And that, again, I consider that to be a wholly biblically based approach. So, right?
Let me say that righteous anger, for sure. Let me say that in a more layman's term, and you tell me if this is what you're saying. You're saying feel justified and be okay with taking a more publicly vocal moral stance on things from an individual level.
Yes, from an individual level. So that goes right up to, if someone asks you your pronouns, just laugh at them.
Right.
Just literally, just laugh. You're basically, I'm going to retain my frame of reference that says what is moral, and I am going to superimpose that on, like, you, the wingnut, who's, presenting me with whatever situation it is that is ridiculous. I'm going to point out how ridiculous I think that is whenever it strays into my social zone of control.
I actually think that's a really clear and concise what now, what next answer to an individualistic perspective. I think that's helpful. I would actually agree with you.
Well, what did you do?
We could maybe, not that I'm saying we should do this. We could double click on like the details, but like I think that's appropriate.
Look at COVID. Let
me finish. I think it's appropriate that, we have lived in a world. I can say I felt this myself, even through instances like Black Lives Matter and other things, where I was afraid, whether I overtly felt this or subconsciously felt this, to be vocal and or to say things publicly where I would maybe get some blowback or things of that nature. And so I like your premise of find your values, your morality, your foundations, and don't be afraid to stand from them and say what you think and say this is not right, whatever the individualistic perspective and case might be. I don't know. I think that's a fair thing to say.
Because that's how you shift the realm of acceptable behavior in society, which will then percolate up into these institutions, right? Planet Fitness didn't create a policy to allow men in the women's locker rooms in a vacuum, right? They did it inside a social. Now, that some people wrongly believe, they'll say like politics is downstream of culture, and that is true sometimes, but it's not strictly true, because you'll obviously have other situations like Roe v. Wade being a perfect counterexample, where from the top down, a different paradigm is foisted onto society. So I don't mean to fall entirely on one side or the other, but and I would go back to just pointing out that how you, if you were sufficiently rebellious in 2020, how you responded to some of the retarded guidelines that they tried to. You can bleep me. I know you guys don't want me to say that. You don't want me to use the hard R.
No, it's fine.
Word.
It's fine.
Okay. How you responded to those kinds of things in 2020, because there was like a week-long period where the grocery store in my area said they were going to have a mask policy, and I remember walking in alongside my dad and my brother. We were picking up something for a because my daughter was being born that year. Yeah. And there was this employee hey, you gotta put a mask on. I just hand up, they just walked right past him. And it was enough people like me doing things like that, that had that policy gone, at least in our area, within a week, because they realized, people just aren't really going along with that. So it does work.
Complying with the absurdity, or complying with the evil is not a way, to comply with it for the sake of peace is not going to do anything. It's just gonna make it stronger, right? So so Tim, to clarify, let me just say, I think I understand where you're coming from, where you said that the positions that we're taking is more too general. It's not getting specific, because I think, you're right. When I was thinking about uniting around the Judeo-Christian values and ethics and morals and everything, that's like, great. How? And that's where I didn't go into. So I appreciate you calling that out. I think that is true. And I think that I would agree with you. It's 100% at an individual level is, don't be afraid to offend somebody for the truth. Because the truth is
go out of your way to do it if it comes across your path.
That's funny.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful even in this conversation, guys, because, again, the whole reason I was so adamant about wanting to say something, because everybody is saying something about this, and we are not acting like the Ben Shapiro's of the world or the Candace Owens or all the people that are politically commentating on this.
I don't ever want to be like either of those people.
I think it does help. I think it does contribute, because I'm teaching this to, my wife, like, what now, what next? And, I don't know. I'm excited for the role Christians can play in this narrative, for the role we play as a podcast in this narrative.
Women have a much greater role when it comes to creating that kind of social ether, right, around what's acceptable, because they're just naturally more social creatures. Whereas, obviously, the three of us are more than happy to, disagree with each other and blah, blah, blah. Women they create a orderly society through consensus, which is why there's less overt conflict in, specifically female spaces, right? And so doing for the women, for our wives, and whatnot, they actually have a more clear avenue towards creating some of that social consensus shifting than even, men like us do. Josh is never going to advocate for the kind of bloody revolution that I think he should, and no amount of me shaming him is going to change that.
Hey, I'm ready for it if it comes. I think that the thing is, as parents too, I think one of the things we need to recognize is our kids are going to go into the world with the values and the things that we've taught them, and because of that, there's a good chance that they're going to try to be shamed because they believe that there's two genders, or they're going to try to be shamed, regardless if it's at a friend's house for a birthday, or out in public somewhere or something, and that topic comes up. They're going to be, and so teaching your kids and understanding, look, these things are going to happen, and what's important is standing up for the truth and standing up for what's right. Somebody can say anything they want, and they can be mad at you all they want, but I need you to know that you're right, and then they're just angry. And you don't have to
laugh in their face when they say stupid things.
You should laugh in their face. You should laugh in their face. And that's honestly, that's been my thing where I'm like, honestly, the biggest event, I mean, on the scale of Trump doing something like this, can you imagine, like, when and the shift that it had in people's perspective to say, oh, this is more serious now. Can you imagine if there was a big televised event and there's millions of people watching, and there's a transgender woman that is up giving a presentation, and they have a child come up, and they're like trying to interact with them, and they give the kid a microphone, and they're like, why are you dressed up like a woman? And they say, and that's publicly broadcast, I think, and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh no, oh, haha, that's cute." And then it's like, "No, why are you're dressed up like a woman? You look weird." Like that type of, like, that kind of like stance, even from the mouth of a child, I think could have far more effect on the psyche of people. Like, oh yeah, the emperor has no clothes. I mean, like, that's
don't
literally
put your children
the
near
story
pedophiles,
of the emperor has no clothes.
Obviously.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. What was that?
I said, don't put your children near pedophiles on purpose.
Don't put your children near pedophiles. I'm not saying volunteer.
I did not put my child near a pedophile, but per your narrative story right here, like literally my wife and I went to lunch at a brewery on Saturday, and there was a whole slew of young kids eating at a table, and there was one guy dressed up like a girl with all his girlfriends, and my 3-year-old is like, "Daddy, is that a girl?" And like out loud in this restaurant, and then I look around, and the restaurant, awesome brewery by the way, which I'll never go to again, and the front glass has a big pride flag and a Black Lives Matter sign, which I didn't see on the way in, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have this conversation with my 3-year-old, but maybe when he's 5. So I'm like, right now, I'm like, yeah, some people are crazy. Don't worry about it right now. We'll talk about it later. But to your point, like, our children are in this world.
Had they already served your food at that point?
Oh yeah. We were wrapping up when I kind of realized I like.
So, dude,
took
if
it
you
all
had
in.
been a little more vocal, they probably just would have kicked you out without you having to pay.
Okay, but I'm not willing to do that with my children there and my wife there, and the fact that I'm carrying a gun, it's like, oh, too many things. I'm not poking this bear right now. Like, no, yeah. But anyway,
free
that's
food
awesome.
though. Stuff's expensive out there.
Yes, it was very expensive.
Make a
$70 for my family of 5. But anyway,
that's so funny.
Gentlemen, I appreciate you guys diving into this with me. I do think it is fruitful. I do think it is beneficial to this conversation. Honestly, I think, per our conversations earlier, like, the reason we have this podcast is for things like this. So, this has been another episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast. And like and subscribe. Leave a comment. I mean, this is not contentious, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on, the things we said, whether it's the governmental side and the legislative side or the individual action side of things. I think this matters. I think to our listeners, this stuff does matter. And what's going to happen next up until November matters.
Absolutely. And I would encourage you, if you're going to make a comment and saying, oh, well, like what I did, we're just going to need to unite, bring some specifics to that.
Yes.
Because I'm realizing
be
that
specific.
Saying that is not as helpful. So whereas I would definitely agree, be vocal about it, I would agree with what Tim is saying, and to the extent of almost making it as ridiculous from the law standpoint on the other side. Like, look, we want to play this game. It's like a nuclear standoff. So anyway, I would encourage you, like, really think about, like, well, we just need to go back to this, but what does this look like, right? Try to dig down. And, whether it be, well, we get rid of judges, we get rid of, we start enforcing laws, think about it. Think about what it is, and also think about what you can do.
And comment.
To make
Tell
that
us.
change.
I want to know.
And comment.
I want to know
Let
what
us
your
know.
thoughts are. Yeah. Good
Cool.
discourse,
All right, see you guys
gentlemen.
later.
Good
Like and
discourse.
subscribe.
See y'all
Talk to you
soon.
later.